It's like linking Nick De Vries to Williams, and
Yes.
I've not seen it anywhere. Like, I've not seen a single journalist say it or report it. I think we're now in a position where you can't be a journalist if all you'd want to do is write. Oh, the kids ask so much better questions than the journalists. Like, I love the responses, and I agree
that must
with
hurt,
that.
man. That must hurt, though. Come on,
a teeny bit, because I'm just like, damn, like.
Now, I know a lot of you watching and listening and people who view my channel have aspirations to work in motorsport, right? And we're all kind of wannabe racing drivers and never quite made it. But one of the other avenues that I actually genuinely thought about going down when I was younger, and I was never quite good enough at English to do it, is motorsport journalism. So today we've got someone who, well, they're Autosport's F1 correspondent. So that kind of, I mean, as journalism jobs in motorsport go, particularly obviously in Formula One, I mean, pretty top tier. I'm sure you'll play it down, mate, but welcome to the Cool Down podcast, Mr. Luke Smith. Luke, how are you, mate?
I'm good. I don't think I can quite live up to that hype and everything you
Yes,
built up in
you
an introduction there. But
come on.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be on here, mate. Like, as I said, before we started recording, like, I've watched the Cool Down before, and it's a really great show. And the moment you dropped me a message with a chance to be on it, I jumped to that, and it's real pleasure to be here.
What I want to try and do with this is, because at the start I just kind of made it up as I went along, but I want to try and get a variety of different people from different backgrounds, whether it's esports drivers, racing drivers, journalists, other YouTubers, and I haven't really ticked that journalism, that kind of more, I guess, traditional journalism box as much as I'd like to. I've had a couple of people on, but I thought today would now be a good time because we've done a few bits together in the past. And I mean, look, again, a big reason I wanted to get you on is because I know that this is it's like, mate, you've got a really cool job. Let's just that first and foremost. Like, do you kind of pinch yourself sometimes when you think like, wow, this is my job to like travel, do a lot of traveling and work and follow this circus of Formula One around? Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is my dream job, and it's a job that I fall more and more in love with every single day. And even when you have, I think those really hard moments, as you get with any job, like even if you have your dream job, then you have those moments where you might moan a bit, or you're like, oh, this is really stupid or whatever. But then you sort of take a step back and you're like, actually, I'm literally being paid to like travel and watch F1 and write about F1 and tell people what I think about F1, and that to me is it's mind blowing, and like it's the job I've wanted ever since I was a lot younger, when I was a kid, and someone told me sort of there was this thing called sports journalism, and but I was a massive football fan when I was a kid, and the idea of like, okay, I could literally be paid to watch football and write about football, that blew my mind. And as I got older, sort of F1 became the bigger appeal to me, and then sort of things started moving to work in the industry. And it's just I do pinch myself every single day. Like, I'm so thankful and lucky, and it's been a sort of a long old road. But and sort of saying about sort of the Autosport F1 job, I mean, honestly, that is sort of where it's always been about getting to. And so I remember when I got the sort of text message through from someone who works at Autosport being like, oh, can we have a chat? And I was like, oh my God, here we go. And it's
is this a wind up?
Honestly, I was just like, wow. So no, I'm just so thankful, and it's really hard to put into words, but no, I do just so every day. I'm just so thankful that I get to do this job for a living, and hopefully live up to the expectations and maximize every opportunity with it, because not many people get to do it, I know.
Well, that's it. And as well, I know I think we're a similar kind of age. So, a long way to go as well, because, there's plenty of years left in both of us. We're kind of in similar domains, I guess. I've kind of fallen into it by accident, but also there's a long way. I wonder if we'll still be online making YouTube videos around F1 in our 60s. I wonder how the world will change by then, mate. God. But anyway, let's go back to, well, you mentioned it already, obviously, when you were younger, but I want to kind of work out exactly kind of where did you come from, Luke, and where did that kind of both the writing, I guess, the writing bug, the journalist bug that you need, but also that motorsport bug, where did that kind of first blossom with you?
I think they were onto very sort of separate planes, and it wasn't until quite later that they actually sort of came together, basically. And I think it was the motorsport bug that got me first. So it was. I remember it was like a rainy Sunday, and there was nothing on TV, and I stumbled across. It was 2005 Brazilian Grand Prix, and it was where Alonso won his first world title. And I remember there was a massive crash at the start and stuff, and I was 9 years old, so I was just like, wow, this is crazy. And I was really interested by it, and I went and spoke to my mum about it, and I was like, oh, like, I've just watched like some F1, like it was really cool. And she was like, oh, I used to love F1. Like I went to the British Grand Prix all the time, like when it was alternating between Brands Hatch and Silverstone. Her favourite driver was Gilles Villeneuve. She was a massive, massive fan of his. And she was like, I really sort of got into F1 and then sort of fell out of love with it sort of in, I guess, sort of the sort of mid 80s or so. And then it was sort of something that we were sort of able to share together, which was really, really lovely. And it also turned out that because she was a nurse at a GP surgery, and it turned out that her boss, basically, he was the circuit doctor for Brands Hatch. So he was like, oh, I can get you guys tickets, like if you want to come along or whatever. So we would go to Brands Hatch, Liddon Hill, another great circuit in Kent, pretty much sort of as much as we could, basically, to watch club racing, to watch bikes, sort of A1 GP there a couple of times at Brands Hatch.
Nice.
And it was great. It was really, really cool. And as sort of a young kid, like that was a really good way to sort of just develop that love for racing. And obviously started watching F1 obsessively from sort of 2006 onwards, basically. And then it was sort of around a similar kind of time that at school, I started to sort of do more sort of like creative writing and things like that. And I had one teacher that was really, really supportive and was like, oh, you're pretty good at writing. Like you could maybe try like writing a book one day or sort of go into it. And it clocked around that time that I was like, okay, well, I like the idea of being a journalist and writing about stuff for a living like that. So I think I set my sights on that. And there was some I remember one teacher, I sort of said, like, I want to be a sports journalist. And he said to me, like, don't bother. He was like, only the really good ones get paid. Like, you're not, just don't bother going into it. Like, be an accountant or something like that. And I remember I said, sir, I'm just going to have to be really, really good then. I'm going to have to work hard.
That's the attitude, man. Love that.
Yeah. And the story goes full circle. I'll get onto it. But it's, so that kind of, I was getting into writing and stuff. And then a mate of mine, he set up it was a video games blog or something like that. And he basically was getting like free video games and reviewing them. And he said, oh, I can't pay you, but I can give you a free game if you'll write about it for me. So I was like 14, 15. I was like, hey, a free video game. Like that was not to like.
Sweet.
So I kind of got into writing on that. And then after a little while, I was like, well, actually, like, why don't I just apply that same method and thinking, but to Formula One? Like, that's my love. I love watching F1. I could just try writing about it. And I'd written a few like sort of pieces and stuff just for myself, really. And I thought, okay, well, now I'll go for it. And like, I set up a little blog website, and it did all right. And it was nice, sort of, just to be writing as much as I could and really threw myself into it. And then, that was when I was 16. So I was very young, honestly, made so many mistakes and so many errors, but I kind of just did it and learned from it. And to me, it was just a way to be writing. And then at the end of, it would have been, the beginning of the 2013 season, so around sort of January, February time. I remember I was literally in my school assembly and I walked out and I had this email on my phone, and it came up and it was from a guy at NBC Sports. And he sent this email and he was like, oh, Luke, we've seen your work. Basically, we're putting together an F1 editorial team to go along with our TV coverage this year. Would you be interested? And I was literally like 17 years old, and I was just like, what is this? And I remember the email.
Yes, obviously I would be interested.
Yeah, exactly. And in the email back, I sent back, I was like, oh, is it like a paid job? And he replied going, but yeah, of course it is. Like it's a serious journalism job. But I was that sort of young and naive. I was just like, wow. And then that's where sort of the proper F1 journey started for me, I guess. That I joined NBC at the start of the 2013 season, before I'd even finished my A levels, which was crazy. And then I remember on the last day of school, I was going around saying my goodbyes to various teachers or whatever, and I ran into that same teacher who had said to me all those years ago, "Don't bother." And he said, "Oh, I've got something for you, something you might be quite interested in." And I was like, "Oh, cool, okay." So he took me to his office and he got out this bit of paper, and it was like, British Grand Prix ticket packages. And he was like, "Oh, like, I know you're a big F1 fan. Like, I thought like if you wanted to go, like you could sort of go and watch it and stuff, and that'd be a really cool thing to do over the summer." And I turned to him, I was like, "Oh, that's really kind of you, sir, but I'm actually attending it as a journalist. Like, I'm going as media, so I don't need that, but thank you." And I just walked off, and I felt like $1,000,000. I was like, yes. And I'm
Oh my
still,
days.
to this day, 8 years later, I'm still so smug about that, because I was like, yeah, that's the story.
Mate, that is incredible. That is such a good story. You've peaked too soon, mate. That's brilliant. That is so good. No, because I do feel like it's, in the one of my best mates is a primary school teacher, and I understand a lot of the whole. Like, I look back as well in my experience with school and how you're kind of. I didn't get it to too much of an extent, to be fair. I felt my teachers were all quite good at kind of allowing me to embrace. So I was quite good academically. Like, I was mainly a B standard student, but I loved the creative stuff. Hence, what got me into design and doing what I'm doing now, kind of long route. But I know a lot of people who have been kind of pushed away from these other form, like you said, like earlier on, in terms of like, oh, you should just go and be an accountant instead, like something safe. Like, do you think that's changing, or do you think, like, I don't know, what's your opinion on how that is and what you'd encourage? Because a lot of people, watching this, a lot of people consuming YouTube now will be, younger than you was when you were having that conversation with your teacher, and your teacher was telling you, to not bother and go for something safer. Like, how would you approach that conversation with someone your age now?
I would say just absolutely go for it. Like, I think that your teachers, obviously, they're very important guides. And I think that, maybe
absolutely,
if I did want to maybe go for a safe job or something, then I think I might have gone into teaching, because I think that's a really good way to sort of shape young people and help them. You tend to have like good ones and bad ones with teachers in terms of their encouragement. But
absolutely.
I think you've just got to go for it. Like, ultimately, if you're that passionate about something, if you want to work hard enough, I think, as the two of us have proven, I think you can get to that goal. You can do what you want. And I just think it's really sad and restrictive when it's like your teachers kind of say, "Okay, well, here's your ceiling. That's it. You're not going to go any further." And I kind of question why people like that go into teaching, because I think the whole point is you want to inspire and say to people, you can be the absolute best you can be. And to me, that, like, I mean, I come from an incredibly humble background. Like, growing up, we didn't have a lot of money and anything, and for me, it was like, I need to be the best if I want to get out of this situation. And I'm just so grateful that I didn't listen to that teacher, that I worked hard. And I think just for anyone sort of who's young and watching and sort of thinking about like future careers and stuff like that, if you want to do YouTube, or if you want to do F1 journalism, or whatever it is, if you're passionate about it, you've got to go for it. You've got to give it your absolute all and just trust the process, and it will pay off. Because I think if you give up before you even start, then you're obviously never gonna get anywhere, I don't think.
It's true. I think as well, expectations are a big thing, because, I feel like I talk about this all the time about how, you need to, I did a little kind of presentation at my mate's school like a couple of months ago. He teaches year sixes, and I was talking to him about YouTube, because YouTube's like that's the big job that, like,
it's
when
like the number one job that kids want to
do
now, isn't it? Yeah.
Literally every single class I went into, at least a third of them, when I said, would you like the idea of being a YouTuber, put their hands up. Like, it's crazy. And a lot of them have already got channels, and they've got the confidence to put themselves out there, which I didn't have when I was year six. God, absolutely not, mate. But I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? There's a balance. You want to set, I feel like when you're so young, and I'm sure you felt the same, like you felt like every decision, like what GCSEs you're going to pick, and then what, like, you felt like that was going to define the rest of your life. And if you made a mistake, then like you're done for. And it's like, it's just not true. It's just not true. It's like, you like you said, you make the mistakes early on, you get them out of your system, and you get to a position now. I mean, you're in your mid-20s, and you've got this position at Autosport. Like, do you think, I know you mentioned your kind of humble beginnings, do you credit that to have given you the drive to push, and because for you to have the for you to go to the extent of setting up your own blog and doing that and putting yourself out there yourself so that NBC would come and essentially pick you up, like that takes more initiative than I think a lot of young people have at that kind of age.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was a weird mix. So I think a lot of it does actually come down to my schooling. So I went to an international school that was it's what a lot of people call posh school, and I insist I'm not posh, even though I went to posh school. A lot of people argue against me, but whatever. But so and I went there and like I had a full scholarship and stuff. I didn't pay to go there because simply couldn't afford it. And I was basically surrounded by all of these kids who didn't really want to be there, and throughout it they were just like, it doesn't matter what I do because I'm just going to get a job at my father's company and he'll sort me out and it'll be all right. And there was kind of there was a lot, there wasn't much drive, and there was just a lot of just, well, it doesn't matter, whatever,
taking it for granted.
And I was someone who I was at the polar opposite, and I sort of I didn't understand it, and that I think that sort of not angered me, but it kind of just fired me up a bit. And I was like, right, I am going to prove myself. I am going to like smash my exams. I am going to do what I can. And yeah, I think that I just always had this sort of push that, okay, I want to just get out of the situation I'm in, basically. And like, I always thought like in the future, like if I ever have a family and stuff, like I don't want them to have the kind of the sort of young struggle, I guess, that I kind of did, and that I think was always sort of pushing me, and then it was just that I just threw myself into what I could with my F1 and my writing, and I loved it, and I kind of I thought like I'll give it sort of, I think I set like a 5-year plan in my head, and I said, look, if I've not got a job from it in 5 years, then wasn't for you, but at least you gave it a shot. I was going to university anyway, so I was just like, it's sort of, it's going to be okay. Like just no sort of no big dramas. And I'm thankful it did work out, and I think I've kind of carried that sort of mentality with me throughout my career, because I mean it's not and I'm sure, as you know, through YouTube as well, it's not sort of just one straight line always going up. Like there are so many setbacks, no. So many decisions and so many bits where you're just like, oh, my career's over. Like I'm just never going to be in F1, and like why am I doing this? Because it's just like I'm just getting upset and it's just hurting me, and clearly it's just not meant to be. And it's just, I guess, that sort of push on to be like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to keep going. So I guess that's kind of always been there. And it's just always sort of carried me through everything I've done really with F1, I think.
Yeah. So when you first got that opportunity with NBC, like how did when you went to your first event, how did that go compared to your like kind of interpretation of how it'd go, like the expectation versus the reality of the situation? How did that balance out? Because I mean, I imagine that must have been pretty scary. It was the first event out.
Yeah, big time. Like it was a lot of you're meeting a lot of people who you've read or watched on TV or heard about for years and years and years. And I think so. My first race was the 2013 British Grand Prix, and like I just went into this media center. I knew nobody. Like I knew of a couple of people. I worked with NBC, and I sort of went over and said hello. But I was just so nervous, and like I didn't really ask many questions to drivers or anything. And I was really really nervous, obviously. And then we had my second race was actually a week after that, the Nürburgring in Germany. It really sort of hit me that we had, it was the Wimbledon final. Andy Murray was in and he won it. And we were all sort of huddled around this journalist laptop watching it. And I was just surrounded, and I just had a moment where I was like, right, I've read that guy. I've looked up to all these people for years and years, and now I'm sat like watching tennis with them, and it's weird. And it was very strange. And I think it took me a number of years to really sort of find my voice in F1 and really sort of get the confidence to like be in media sessions, sort of be sort of asking tough questions and sort of getting properly stuck in. But also I kind of think, but I did start when I was like my first race, I was 18 years old. Like nobody knows what they're doing when they're 18. So
no, I cut your teeth very early on, mate.
You can't. And I sort of cut myself, my sort of past self slack, I think, for that, because I'm just like, it was early days. And it's it was odd though. It was, and it sort of did take a number of years until I sort of fully felt comfortable and confident. And now, yeah, I think back sort of when I first walked in that Silverstone Media Centre, knowing nobody, and now like I walk into the Silverstone Media Centre and I know sort of 95% of people. It's just it's very odd, but I sort of I take some heart in that because it kind of shows like how much things have changed over the past sort of 8 years or so.
And how much has the, in those 8 years, has the job fundamentally changed much? Because we know obviously with social being so much more of a, compared between now and 2013, like how has your job changed over those years?
Yeah, hugely. And I think we're now in a position where you can't be a journalist if all you'd want to do is write. I think that day is long gone. I think you've got to be able to write, you've got to be able to podcast, you've got to be able to be good on social, you've got to be able to do sort of videos such as this or whatever. And I think I think journalism has become far more than just, okay, I'm just going to write about racing cars and that's it, because I just don't think it really works like that now. I think that it's a much more sort of well-rounded job. And I think the rise of YouTube has been huge. I think that we've seen sort of guys such as yourself, guys such as Matt Gallagher, for example, who've sort of built really good reputations and really good careers off the content they're creating. And as journalists, we've got to be very sort of mindful of that, and we've got to watch that and be like, okay, well, these guys they've got an important voice, so we've got to sort of, I guess, sort of look at what they're doing, look at how people are reacting in a way. And it's funny because like we see, I mean, there was a story that came up I think last week about it's like linking Nick De Vries to Williams, and I've not seen it anywhere. Like I've not seen a single journalist say it or report it. But there was a Twitter account that tweeted it, and it picked up like 4,000 likes, 4,000 retweets, and whatever. Yeah. And then a colleague of mine was at the London race over the weekend, and he asked Nick about it. And Nick basically said, "Oh, I was as surprised as you guys were." But we ran a story off it, and I'm kind of like, I was sort of in two minds. I was like, well, actually, we're running a story based off something that started probably by someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or just was like, oh, let's just do this and see whatever. And it kind of escalated. And it's weird, but that's kind of the nature of the job now, that it's now, I think, much easier for people to have a voice. And I think that that's why it's sort of one of the challenges of my job is sort of saying to people, look, this is why I'm a voice you should trust, because I've got these contacts, I've got this job, we are in the paddock, we talk to the people. But a lot of the time, obviously, readers will tend to sort of, they'll want to believe, they'll read what they want to believe, if that makes sense. So if somebody loved the idea of Nick De Vries racing for Williams, they're like, oh, I love that, retweet, here's my view on it. It then reached another 30 people, they do the same, and it's crazy. So I think the job has changed, but I think that like I like to think like I'm quite good with sort of social and things like that. So I've sort of got stuck in. I've enjoyed that, which has been good. But as we sort of said a bit earlier, like, what's it going to be like in another 8 years' time? Like, how far removed are we going to be from that original job of, oh, I'm just going to write about racing cars, basically?
That's what I mean. It must get. I hadn't really thought of that, but yeah, it's the whole like fake news epidemic that is a very kind of common thing that's talked about, obviously a lot in politics, but it affects every form of journalism and broadcasting. Like, I guess, it's your job to kind of sift through all the shit, for want of a better term, to find out what is actually genuine, what is actually, what you can back up. Like, I don't know, how do you feel about that because I'm guessing that that's always existed to an extent, but not as it, like, I could literally make up something mad and just post it. And then, like, I could, if maybe that's it. To be fair, that's a good video idea. Like, I could like
my wildest F1 rumor.
See how many people, see if I can make you fall for it, and then I'll put you in the thumbnail. But I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that kind of? Don't know. Do you see it as like a challenge, or do you see it? Do you look at it with a bit of disdain and be like, "Oh, this is like annoying that I'm having to," you know what I mean? It must be a bit.
Yeah, it is. I think it is both a challenge and it's deeply frustrating. And there was an account on Twitter a few months back that it was something like at F1 Insider or something, and it was set up as like an in the know account, and it got like 10,000 followers or whatever. And I remember like one of the tweets that really banged. It was like, Alpine are sort of really looking at Pierre Gasly for next season. Like they're sort of, it's like looking really, really strong, like it's going to happen, whatever. And this at the same time that we all knew that things were going pretty well for Ocon and the sort of talks were starting. So it didn't really make sense. But people jumped on it. And then I think once that account hit 10,000 followers, whoever owned it just went, this has all been fake. I've just done it to prove how easy it is for in the know accounts to sort of be set up. And I love that. I love that because I was like, that proves exactly the challenge we're facing. And it does vary from sort of like from website to website. I mean, obviously Autosport, we hold the highest editorial standards, and there's something that I really love the company and the publication for. But then there are smaller websites. I know every website has to start somewhere, but a lot of them will just see like, Autosport reported this, or Build or Automotor and Sport or whoever. Let's just take that and sort of twist the headline a bit, and that's how they generate their clicks. And it's frustrating because it is clickbait, and and then that becomes that. So as an example, so one of those smaller websites, not one of those mentioned, sorry, but just like a small website. They ran a story a few months back being like, oh, there's a rift between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, like they're not on talking terms or whatever. No one's ever said that. Like no proof, just this has happened. And then a journalist asked it to George in the press conference, and he was like, "Oh, is this true?" And George was like, "No, obviously not." And he said, "No, me and Lewis are all cool. Like it's all right." And then, but then what he said, and we were like, "Oh, we've got to do a story on that now." And I just felt so annoyed that it's just this the root of it is totally baseless and fake, and it's frustrating. And then it also works the other way around when we report something. So, for example, with the Vettel, Sainz, and Ricciardo moves last year, I think Autosport, I think we were hot on all of it. I think we were pretty much first, pretty much every step of the way. But then the moment you sort of tweet something, right, this is happening, people will just come back being like, oh, source? Like, what's your source? And it really drives me mad because as journalists, that's the whole point of it. You should only report something if you know wholeheartedly it is going to happen. And you've got to have, again, the highest sort of journalistic standards. And my sort of challenge and my job is getting across to people why that matters and why, like, you should be reading sort of those websites that hold that and sort of do value top journalism, because I think it is, it's just frustrating when, you sort of see these wild rumors come about and you're just like, that's clearly not true. But it's just some website has sort of seen a comment here and then translated or whatever. And, I think, and another example of that
translations are a nightmare as well. Like,
totally.
Like, mistranslations must be a big pain in the ass.
Yeah, and that's something that happened with the the Lewis Hamilton Helmut Marko story last year, where I think a website ran a piece saying, oh, Marko sort of been slagging off Lewis, saying, oh, we shouldn't be focusing on BLM and all his activism. He should focus on F1. Lewis had seen this story. He put an Instagram post about it saying like, oh, Helmut, like, I feel really disrespected or whatever. And then like we saw that and we were like, oh shit, like this is huge. I Googled it and couldn't find the story or the quotes anywhere. And we were just like, it's fake then. And that is that's the problem we face with F1 media at the moment, that it's a lot of people just going like, okay, let's just write this or write that. And sometimes there's not really the thought behind it or the sources behind it.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit of a challenge that I face. And I just really, want to get across to sort of readers and stuff that, okay, we have a good track record for sort of like breaking stories or for being accurate. We're not going to report something unless we know it's going to happen. It's a tricky one. It is tricky because I know websites have to start out somewhere and they make mistakes. And I did that myself when I started out. Like, you sort of learn as you go. But it's when you see websites sort of just serially doing it, it's like, oh, this is just making my life so much harder. But
what do you think's the solution to the problem? Because I guess a big part of it as well is the fact that also, Autosport has been around for so long and it's got the name, and obviously you as well, and all of you are involved are all putting your faces and your real identities to the brand. So you've got more to lose if what you present ends up being massively incorrect. Whereas a faceless Twitter page,
exactly,
with just Sebastian Vettel as the avatar, like it doesn't matter. Like they don't care. So how do you think there's a way that this can be? Is it just a matter of, I guess, changing people's perception of how to look at these pages relative to an actual genuine publication like yourselves, like The Race, like whatever, like motorsport.com? I don't know, what's the solution?
Yeah, I think it is just about getting those perceptions changed. That it's about when you see a bit of news or when you see a tweet sort of saying, "Oh, this might happen," try and sort of question, okay, where has that come from? Like, what's the root back of it? What's the story behind it? You can't just take something on face value because, again, like if you see, oh, Nick De Vries is going to race for Williams, and you're like, oh, that would be really cool, and you kind of just assume it's true, then and it's same with like you said, sort of it goes across like fake news, it goes across everything. Like you can like, okay, so like when Donald Trump was making all of his sort of crazy claims and stuff, and everyone will be like, just try and fact check it, like take a step back and go, is what he is actually saying true? And I mean, obviously for F1 is nowhere near quite as bad as sort of, or as damaging as that, but it's a similar kind of principle. Like, I just think you've got to sort of question what the sources are and where's it coming from. And like, I mean, I think, and and I think just sort of know your trusted sources. Like, I think if as you say, like if we report something, or even if like rival websites, even if the race reports something, I'll read that, I'll go, well, okay, that's going to be likely true then. Like, it's going to be true because these guys are professionals, they are top guys who know what they're on about. And similar with Autosport, like it goes through such a rigorous process that it's not just a case of throwing enough shit at the wall and hoping something sticks, which is kind of how a lot of it, particularly on Twitter nowadays, works. Is that if an in the know account tweets, I don't know, if they tweet today, it's going to be Valtteri Bottas at Alfa Romeo next season. They're binning off Kimi Raikkonen, and he's going to partner Callum Ilott, for example. Now, that's a scenario that is plausible, but it's impossible to say how likely that is. And just as a disclaimer, I've heard nothing to say that is what is going to happen. Like, it's just a theory. But if that ends up happening, that Twitter account in 5 months' time can link back to that tweet and be like, I told you all along.
Legitimacy, it's true.
Yeah.
Pin
So,
tweet.
and that's the challenge. It's so tricky, and sadly I don't think there is any answer apart from just trying to keep at it, really. But
it was like when Carlos Sainz got announced at Ferrari, I called that move, and I called Daniel to McLaren in the January beforehand.
Oh, wow.
I did a video, and they're in the thumbnail. And then I was like, oh my god, I'm a genius. But obviously, then I'll be like, oh, Daniel Ricciardo is going to be Driver of the Year this year, and that's not gone very well for me, has it? So. You win some, you lose some. But I mean, and obviously, again, with the putting yourself in the content, again, more than in the past, it's not so much Autosport. It's, people know it's Jake, it's Jess, it's you, putting your characters in that more. How have you found that? Because again, I know you said before, like, it's important to be multifaceted as a journalist. You can't just get away with writing and nothing else these days. But how have you personally found putting yourself out there onto the internet? Because I guess that wasn't really what you signed up for when you first started the job, was it?
No, it wasn't. But no, it's something I've sort of embraced, and I do enjoy. Like, I guess you've kind of got to build that sort of personal brand alongside your brand that you're working for, if that makes sense. And I think that, I was sort of, like, through my previous jobs, like with NBC, with Crash.net as well. Like, I was very hot on that. Like, okay, like, I want to just show people, like, through my reporting, that what I'm doing is legitimate. Like, it can be trusted, and just sort of throw myself into it. And I think that's really stepped up a lot since joining Autosport, because it's just, I mean, there's obviously far more resources. It's just a much bigger operation, and the standards are so much higher. But it's been a lot of fun. Like, I've loved doing the Is It Just Me podcast with Jess, which at some point we are going to bring back. Like, it's life stuff, and it's all on me. Like, life stuff for me at the moment just means it's not at the top of the list, unfortunately. But it's things like that, like, I've loved doing, and I think just because I think you do have to. I think particularly sort of linking back to, like, sort of like legitimacy and sort of like owning your news and things like that. I think that it's very important that if you really stick, sort of, I guess, sort of nail your flag to the mast, like, okay, this is me reporting it, and like you guys can trust me, you guys can trust this publication. I think that is really important, because, as you say, if it's just sort of a faceless person behind a Twitter account, and even to some extent, like reading articles and stuff, if there's no byline, you're kind of like, well, like who wrote this? Like, and I think it is important. But I have loved doing it. Like, it's been really good fun with Autosport to sort of be sort of, I guess, more of a face going outwards. I think that's something that they've pushed a lot in the past sort of 18 months, 2 years or so. I think that's been really, really good fun. I think that it's helped, I think, give the brand a bit more sort of, I think a bit more of a sort of openness, maybe. Like, it's kind of like you watch a YouTube video and, okay, yeah, I know Jess, or I know Luke, or I know Jake, or whoever, which is quite nice. So yeah, I think it's been good, and like, as you say, it's not really what we signed up for. And there are some days where I'm just like, I wish I could just delete my Twitter account and not bother with this anymore. But I also am like, well, no, because it is such an important part of my reporting and of sort of the job we're doing. So you have to embrace it. I think otherwise it's just going to be a struggle.
What do you think makes like a good journalist now? Then in 2021. If you're hiring, or if you're looking to bring someone in, what are the main skills you're looking for now? Is still written work top of the pile, but or has that kind of changed a bit? Maybe.
I think it's always been like an old running thing. Like, is a good journalist, do you have to be a good writer, or can you just be a good journalist? Because I think they are two actually very different things. And I've worked with journalists in the past who. Like, I've been subbing their copy, not Autosport, I must say. I've been subbing copy, and I'm just like, this is terrible. Like, this person cannot write. Like, oh my god! But the actual like connections and the actual sourcing they've got is just out of this world. And I'm like, it's just so frustrating, because you kind of just want sort of that total package. So yeah, I think written work, I think it is very, very important. I think particularly for the job that I do, I think, that's very important. I think that there's got to be an openness. I think you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to do, I'm happy to do like an Instagram live, or I'm happy to be on Twitter, and I'm happy for people to come back and be like, oh, I don't agree with you, you're an asshole, rah, 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 and have the thick skin to be like, thanks, buddy, have a great day. Because unfortunately, what people aren't always going to like you. That's just kind of the way it is. So I think that's part of it. And I think also just the confidence to sort of just be willing to ask those big questions and really, really be there and say, look, I'm going to be sort of front and center, and not be afraid to ask those questions. And I think there's something that, particularly starting out, it can be quite difficult. And I had that definitely. That I was like, I'm surrounded by all these big journalists.
I would be terrible at that. I wouldn't be very good at that. That's definitely that would be my worst part of it, definitely.
and it is, and like, even myself, I've sort of in the past I had struggles with sort of confidence and anxiety and things. And like, when I was younger, one of my big struggles was like talking to people. And then I signed up to do a job where I have to talk to people all the time. And I'm just like, it doesn't make sense, but you've got to overcome that. And I think particularly when I was at Crash, I mean, they gave me a wonderful platform and a wonderful opportunity to be full-time in the paddock for the very first time in 2018. And it was a great chance. And I was literally at every media session I could get to, I was asking as many questions as I could. And I think that meant that when an opportunity came up at Autosport, that I think that's when they were like, oh, well, Luke's around. Like, he knows the paddock. He's asking the questions. He's at every media session. And I didn't just sort of like sit in the corner and just get the quotes and then type it up or whatever without asking anything. As an example, I mean, earlier today we had a roundtable with the promoter of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And obviously one of the big questions about that is going to be around human rights and the country's record and sports washing. I felt no qualms at all about asking that. And it's maybe sort of be like, okay, well, how's it going to react or anything like that? But to his credit, the promoter was very good in handling it and sort of gave a very good response that we've put up on Autosport already. But if you're not willing to ask those questions, it's just like that for me is the big thing that is a good journalist. And like, if I mean, many moons from now, when I want to hang up my you don't really a helmet or anything. I don't know what journalists have,
Hang
but
up
a
your
pen
pen.
or something. Hang up my pen. There we go. And I'm like, okay, who's going to fill my shoes or whatever? That would be the big thing. Like, who's there asking those questions? Who's saying like I'm willing to get stuck in? And yeah, sometimes like I've asked questions before that have made me look like such an idiot, but I'm like, actually, you know what? Yeah, take it on the chin, and I'll just think about it late at night when I'm sort of having big like worries about the world and stuff. Like, I remember that thing you did 8 years ago, or whatever. Yeah, you have to deal with it though. It's fine.
So when you're coming up with the questions to ask, what's the kind of, because are you asking basically like, what do the people want to know? Is that your thought with every question you ask, or is it sometimes like, because what I love now where they do the questions where the little 8-10-year-old kids ask a question, and what I think that a lot of content. I saw, I don't know if you watched a lot of the England stuff around the Euros, the England YouTube channel, they did some really, really good behind the scenes stuff with the players. And you could tell that the people who were asking the questions, they were like one of the lads, and they felt very ingrained. And the responses they were getting from the players were very, very different to the post-match interviews that they do. So again, what is it for you? Because, and again, extending on to why I think, you putting your personal brand out there along with Autosport, why I've done so well, why YouTube's growing, is because people trust people more than they do brands, and obviously if you've got faces to represent a brand, then it's in the same way the stuff that I do with Veloce as well, like having our face, mine, Aldous, and Hayden's face there kind of makes it more engaging, I guess. And in terms of the question you're asking, what exactly are you trying to get from the drivers? And again, has that changed over time? Because I feel like we are getting more human responses from the drivers now. So has the journalism kind of changed, do you feel, at all? Or maybe are we just seeing more of it because of social media?
I think it's a bit of both, and I think that it's interesting you mentioned the fan questions there. And I saw a comment on Reddit a couple of months back, and I've seen it on Instagram a lot as well. And it's people going, "Oh, the kids ask so much better questions than the journalists." Like, I love the responses, and I agree
that must
with
hurt,
that.
Man. That must hurt, though. Come on,
a teeny bit, because I'm just like, damn, like it's been 8 long years, but I'm also like, it is, and someone on Reddit did this phenomenal reply, and they said what you've got to remember is that a kid, they've literally been told, hey, you're going to ask an F1 driver a question, and they're like 5 or 6 years old, they can ask what they want. And it's just like I love the one in Austria, I think it was to Verstappen and Perez. It was a kid like playing an accordion, and he was like, oh, hello guys. He played it a little bit, and he went, is it true that racing drivers have lots of girlfriends? And they were wetting themselves laughing, and it was so funny.
You can't ask that
we
question.
Can't ask that. No, exactly.
No,
we can't. We absolutely cannot. And a lot of it is because we have a lot of time we have a set brief, or there's something that we're working towards. So there might be like, so for example, I did a feature for the New York Times recently about Netflix and like the Drive to Survive series and how that sort of fueled all the growth in the United States, basically. So I spent like one of the Thursday media days, I spent basically asking pretty much every single driver a similar kind of question, like, oh, how has it grown? Like, have you seen more American fans and things like that? And you another journalist kind of clock on to what you're doing, and they'll think, okay, like a couple of journalists said like to me, okay, like we see what you're doing, we're not going to write anything around it, because like that's obviously what you're aiming for, if that makes sense. And yeah, like you have that, I think you know in the back of your mind, like sometimes like a feature you're writing for, okay, therefore I need to ask this. I think particularly in COVID times as well, because we have such a small window to speak to the drivers, you often only get one question, if you're lucky sometimes, to put to someone that can make or break your feature, basically. So it is part of that, but it's also, I think the drivers are very well sort of PR trained and things like that now, and a lot of them do know how to sort of very well strike that middle ground of, okay, I'm going to give you an answer you can use, but without like being too spicy or being too sort of controversial or anything like that, which I get from sort of a team and a brand perspective. Like that's kind of what you want. Because obviously nowadays, like we report so much and we're aggressive in our news strategy and stuff that it's they may not want to sort of step out of line, I guess, a little bit. So I think that's why they do then enjoy questions that are a little bit different. And but even for us, like sometimes if we do get the chance to ask something a bit offbeat, like I was interviewing Esteban Ocon recently for a GP racing feature coming up. And a few months back, basically, we'd race against each other on Gran Turismo Sport on the PlayStation.
Nice.
And the moment he logged on the call, he was like, "Oh, Luke, like I remember racing," and like we talked a bit about the racing we did. And towards the end of the interview, I was like, "Oh, let's talk about GT Sport, like how you sort of playing on that and everything like that." And it was, I mean, Esteban's a lovely bloke anyway, and really easy to interview. But you just saw this added sort of spark, and I think that a lot of the drivers they're so used now for so many years being asked the same questions about. What do you think about Pirelli's compound choice, or like what do you think about the competition? That when you do throw them something a little bit different, that they really hook onto it and they really sort of enjoy sort of expressing themselves a bit more, knowing it's not going to be, I guess, sort of too edgy either way. I think.
Yeah, that's why I feel like the reason that a lot of like my personal kind of view on it, the reason a lot of kind of YouTubers, not just myself, Josh Revel, Cranky Yankee, Aldas, like there's a lot of us who kind of started at a similar time, and there's loads more people coming through now who are doing amazingly well. And it's like, I think there's different types of, because F1's got such a broad fan base, right? You've got the old school traditionalists who are super interested in like the fine details of the aerodynamic regulation changes, blah blah blah, and all that. And then you've got the fans who, who's the most handsome F1 driver. Yeah. You've got like a very broad spectrum, and I guess I feel like the old school traditional fan has been very well catered for the most of the sport's history. Yeah. Whereas the more human fan who's more invested, and I'm sure you found this with Drive to Survive and people knowing that, oh, you work in Formula One, that's cool. Yeah. I'll look at F1. Same with my YouTube channel, so many people who had no interest in F1 because I'm doing this job, which is a weird, different job. They've watched Drive to Survive. Now they're bang into it. But they're not into it for the aerodynamic regulator. I don't give a toss about that. Yeah, exactly. They just want to know about the characters and the personalities and the drivers and the human beings. Because I think that's something I think unique about F1 compared to, say, football. Yes, of course, footballers, they are individuals. They're people as well. But you've got 20 teams with squads of 30 players. So that's 600, like versus 20 drivers. You can get way more invested in individuals. Yeah, exactly. And I think that kind of, I just feel like that's why the YouTube space, and I feel like I've noticed it with your content. I've noticed it with a lot of the more kind of traditional old school brands. I feel like you're voicing things in a more human way, than maybe in the past. Would you agree with that?
Definitely, yeah. And I think that is so important. And I think that I personally, that is what I want to write about. Like, I want to be writing about. I don't want to be writing about. Yeah, it is storytelling. It's about like how do we get to this point? Like, what is the story that you can't get anywhere else? And I think that it is. I think there is definitely a market for sort of the niche stuff. And my colleague Alex at Autosport, he does a 100%. Absolutely top job analyzing like long runs in practice and everything like that. And that is so important. Like we see it on our stats and stuff, like for our market, that is massively important. But there is also this whole other market of, as you say, it's the sort of the more, I guess, casual incoming fans that want to know the human story. And I think that, like, I mean, for example, when everything happened in Australia last year and the world was falling apart, like I did an article on Lewis Hamilton saying like how he was sort of stepping up and being that moral leader. The same again when we had all of the sort of BLM movement and activism and all of that. That's way more important than any sport. That's way more important than what F1 is doing. And F1 has to have a voice in that. And Lewis has been leading that. But just because we're a sort of specialist publication, we can't just ignore it. We've got to do it. And I think one of the pieces I'm personally most proud of writing, I did about mental health in F1. And I did that last sort of September, October time. And that, for me, was such a huge issue that for so many years have been totally 100%. Overlooked. But now it's like, now I can actually write about that and people are like, yeah, this is the content we want. Like, we want to hear about this. And And I think it's important. It's got to be that human side. And I think that, like, the work that you guys in the YouTube community do, that is now such an important part of F1's future, I think, to get fans into the sport, because we can't just rely on people sitting down and watching and going, right, I like this. I want to learn about downforce and setups and all of that. Like, they might be like, I don't know, like one of my friends loves Daniel Ricciardo now because of Drive to Survive, and but does Daniel Ricciardo have a girlfriend or something like that? And it's that kind of, I guess, that kind of interest and human side of it that we can't ignore, really.
Well, it's like giving people a way in, isn't it? Because F1 is quite a intimidating sport to get into when you're coming from a, you know, I think because we've both grown up being into motorsport and being into Formula One, we kind of, I think it's quite easy to forget. And I speak to a lot of people who are like, yeah, but I don't really understand what's going on. And when you actually kind of take your own knowledge and you're like, oh, wow, there is actually quite a lot to take in here. So maybe it's like something like Drive to Survive that, you know, encourages you. And then, you know, maybe then you watch some of my videos where I'm, I don't know, doing some opinion piece, and then maybe they'll eventually get, and then they'll watch one of your videos about the new 2022 regulation, where it's taking very complex information and wording it in a more accessible way that doesn't scare people off. Because I think Sam Collins, for example, I think he's fantastic. I think he's so good because he just takes these subjects and just, I don't know, just the way he comes across is, I just think it's brilliant, and how he just makes it seem so much more accessible. But I guess with Autosport, because you can't be all things to all people, so you know, how far do you go as a brand? Do you feel that you want to cater to the more casual fan, but if you do that, then you risk alienating your kind of core, more kind of old school fan base? So how do you balance that? So for me, for example, with my content, if I started making, which I never would because I don't have the knowledge of this, like extreme deep dive, like intricate, like most of my audience would be like, what the fuck are you on about, Tomo? Like, just tell me about your favorite liveries. You know what I mean? I'd alienate them. So how do you kind of, because obviously Autosport, you've got the other, you know, the brands in the family as well. Like, how do you, I guess, walk that line?
I think that's a question for people much higher up the food chain than I am, to be honest. But it's I'm just a humble F1 reporter. But no, it is. I think that's the challenge that I think I think every motorsport media brand does face. Like, where are you going to position yourself? And I think you see that website like WTF1, for example, has just grown phenomenally huge, and it's so good at what it does. And again, like if WTF1 tomorrow were like, oh, here's like our analysis of long run pace in FP2, their audience would be like, well, hang on a minute here. And it's the other side of the coin for Autosport. Like I think we can be, I think we are becoming broader on sort of more human stories and more human issues and matters, if that makes sense. But I think that, and again, I'm sort of giving my view on it.
Of course.
Is that it's our core audience is still like the motorsport diehards who they've had an Autosport subscription since 1980, and it'll be on their doormat every Thursday, and they love reading that. And I think that's really cool. And I think there is kind of across sort of the spectrum, I guess, of sort of motorsport content at the moment, I guess you could say. There's kind of a slot for everybody. Like there's a bit where 100%. Like Autosport will cater to one type of fan. YouTube community will do another type, and it's kind of about where do you fit in. And I think so long as everyone is kind of like finding their place, and there is enough interest, and I think it all sort of stimulates more interest in the long run. Like it grows the fan base 100%. As a whole. And definitely. You will, as you say, like you might have a casual fan come in through Drive to Survive who turn into this absolute diehard fan, and that they might sort of change their sort of media consumption and things. I think it all kind of slots together and fits in quite well. And I think that, I mean, personally, like with Autosport, like I'm just really, I love the publications bits. I love my job. It is my dream job. And I'm just really proud that I think since I joined, like, I'm glad that I've had a platform to kind of be like, okay, well, these are important issues outside of F1, but we do need to be talking about them. I'm just pleased to sort of been there's been a good enough response to that it's not people being like, well, hang on, where's my where's my long run pace analysis, whatever,
Mm,
because there is still that. It's just something in addition
of
to kind
course.
of broaden the horizons a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. Like, there's room for everyone to thrive if everyone
Yeah.
has their own little areas of the sport. Because again,
Yeah,
the fan
definitely.
base is so broad, everyone can everyone can eat. All right,
Yeah.
there's room at the table for everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but then obviously, Luke, you personally, because again, you're still only in your mid-20s, so there's a long career ahead. Do you have like a do you have like an end goal personally? Do you have like things you'd like to do within the sport? Like, is there any particular thing, or are you just kind of happy to make it up as you go along? You know.
Huh. That's a good question. I think honestly, until 2020, I was kind of always honest, and it may sound a bit cringe or like oh yeah whatever, but the Autosport F1 job was kind of always what I was going for. Like I was
That was
always
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's the goal, that's where I want to be, because
Hmm.
to me it doesn't get much bigger than that. Like I think within the industry, I think that's as big as it can be.
Mm.
And like I'd worked and worked and worked so hard sort of through the years leading up to that, and I got to 2020, and I was just like, and I started the job, and I just thought it's time to just sort of try and enjoy the view a little bit, if that makes sense. Like stop sort of thinking
Mm.
like you've got to keep climbing, keep going, keep sort of pushing. Um, and yeah, and it is partly that, and like, I'm still really excited to see how much more I develop and how much better I get as a journalist, and just how much I guess how much better I can be in 6 months from now, a year from now, 5,
Mm.
10 years from now. And I think I'm in the right sort of place to get that development. Like I love my job to pieces. Um, and I've kind of the sort of voice in my head that was kind of going like, right, keep going. Like that's what you want to go for. That quietened down a lot when I joined Autosport. I was like, okay, you've got
Mm.
there now. Like just try and chill out a little bit.
Mm.
And then, but yeah, I mean, you always kind of think like, okay, what for the future? Like, yeah, what's going to happen? And honestly, I don't know. Like, I'm very relaxed. Like, I don't know. Like, am I going to be an F1 in sort of 10, 15 years from now? I don't know. Like,
Mm.
I at one point, like, I had a dream. Like, okay, I'd love to do like an Olympics and a football World Cup and a rugby
Mm.
World Cup and a Wimbledon and be like an all round sports journalist. And
Yeah, yeah.
that to me still really appeals because I love
Mm.
all sports. But then also the idea of like being in this wonderful, amazing sport for a long period of time as well. That's really
Mm.
appealing. And yeah, so I don't know, like maybe like just see what opportunities come up. Like if I could do I
Yeah.
don't know like TV stuff or commentary or try something like that one day, that'd be quite cool. And I
Yeah.
did recently filmed with Will Buxton for his new show for Motorsport TV, and like we were sat on the
Nice.
sofa, so I had like a proper earpiece in and everything for the first time, and I was like, this
Yep.
feels like proper telly, and it really just blew my mind. I was like, this is so
Yeah.
much fun, like it's so cool.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know, but I'm kind of excited to see where things go, and it is I say like I'm 26, like I've got time
Mm.
to do what I want, and sort of I think just the big thing I've learned over the years is just to trust the process. Like if you work
Mm.
hard and you keep going, and as long as you're sort of nice to people and keep an open mind, then you'll get to where you want to go. I don't know what it's going to be in the future, but I'm really excited. But equally, I love to bits what I'm doing now, so it's it kind of feels like win-win at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think that? What do you think that this has taught you about kind of the idea of happiness? Because you, like you say, you've got to that, you've reached that grail, that job that you were aspiring for so long, and now you're there. Because I feel like a lot of it is being happy, isn't it? People talk about, oh, you got to be happy, you got to follow happiness, blah blah blah, and it's like, but I think we see it as like a destination. Where I feel like it's more of a you've got to find happiness in a daily process,
Yeah.
and it's human nature to want to, like, there's a reason homo sapiens have got to where they are in the world, right?
Mm.
Like by this unrelenting pursuit and pushing, and you just in terms of your like personal kind of happiness, because like you said, it might be your dream job, but it doesn't mean every day is the dream day, you know what I mean? You have your good days, your bad days. Like, yeah, how do you feel that's kind of the wisdom that you've gained around the idea of kind of being content and happy in your life now that you're in the position you're in? Get a bit deep here, mate.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question though, and I think it's taught me that, yeah, just because you have the dream job, that doesn't solve everything, if that makes sense. And I think that I remember like when I was gosh, about 2021 or so, and my F1 career was in its boots. Like there was stuff going on, and I was like, I'm never going to attend a Grand Prix again. I'm going to get sacked. I'm terrible. Like, what am I doing, basically? For various factors that I'll probably talk about one day. But it's yeah, and it really, at that point, and I remember that I spoke to my mum about it, and I remember I was so convinced that my job was so intrinsically linked to, am I happy with my life, and am I content with what's going on in my life? And yeah, and like I think that it doesn't really work like that. I think that, and it's a conversation I actually had with a friend of mine who also works in F1 the other day. Like, you can't be defined really by your job, and I think that is something that is it's a trap that I think can be fallen into quite easily, particularly when you're so passionate and work so hard. And like, if you're always on, basically, it's kind of like that. Yeah, it's kind of, I know, all you want to talk about, or whatever. Well, not all you want to talk about, all that people think you want to talk about, for example. When actually, like,
you're Luke, the F1 guy. Let's just talk
honestly,
about F1.
Number of conversations I've had like that, and I'm just like I'll meet new people and be like, it's nice meeting you, but also like I do have this other that's my job. Like I've got other interests. Like I love music, I love running, I love all sports. Like, there's so much more than just the job, basically. And yeah, I think it's shown to me that I think it's made life a lot more straightforward in a lot of ways. Like, because you kind of you're not sort of thinking like, okay, where have I got to position myself to be able to get to the next bit or whatever. And it's relieved a lot of pressure in many areas. But yeah, it's not the be all and end all. And I think that's something that I've really sort of learned in the past sort of 18 months or so. And I think particularly this year, like, it's really hit home to me that it's my dream job, but it is still a job. And it's still something that when the going gets tough, sometimes it's good to be able to just switch off a bit and not think about F1. And it's I think I've grown up a bit sort of in that regard. Like, I've learned that working a 7-day week, that's not something to be proud of. That's like, you need to sort of have some look after yourself as well.
That grind culture is you can see where it comes from, but at the same time, it's important to work hard, but also you have to set boundaries, otherwise you're going to burn out. And talking of, you mentioned running briefly in that as well, and this is the section where I did want to branched away from Formula One. It's perfect timing. Yes. You love a track run. I saw on your Instagram. I mean, which tracks have you ran around? Because I guess because you're there for the whole weekend, you get an opportunity to run around the track. I follow a few of you guys who follow the circus around, and I see quite a few of you on your track runs. Which ones have you run, and which was your maybe favourite, and which was the least favourite?
So I've run, must be about 14 or 15 or so, I want to say now, because so basically 2018 was my first full season. And back in 2018, like, I didn't really exercise. Like, I was a really big guy, and I remember, like, everyone go off their track run, I'd be like, losers, like, I'm just gonna sit here and eat my hamburger or whatever. And then I kind of, like, towards the end of the year, I was like, actually, that might be quite fun to do sometime, like, just to sort of check out the track or whatever. And then, like, I started out in beginning of 2019, and like, my fitness grew pretty quickly because I was starting from basically flat zero. And I just got to the point where I absolutely loved it. And it was like the highlight of my weekend was going for my track run. So I did, I think I ran pretty much every track I went to in 19, and then a few last year as well. I think the favourites, I think Spa is a killer because it is 7 kilometres. It's really long. I can imagine. Eau Rouge is like because you get through your first kilometre, basically goes pretty much from the start line to the bottom of Eau Rouge, and it's a little bit downhill as you get towards Eau Rouge. You're like, your watch is going, it's like, I'm a pace is pretty good. And then you start, and you're just like, oh my days, like this is not stopping. When is it going to end? And then you kind of get over the crest and you're like, okay, thank God, it's no more uphill. But you've got a kilometre straight all the way to Lake Com, and your legs for
Yeah.
that whole kilometre are still crying out in pain and yelling at you. And you're like, oh man. And then obviously you get into sort of the second sector and it starts going downhill and it's a bit gentler, a bit easier to deal with. And then you get to a point where you're at, I think halfway through Puon, so it's that fast left-hander, and
Yeah.
you look up and through the forest, and you can see the start-finish line, and it looks
Oh,
it looks
really?
like it's in the sky, and you're just like, I've got to go all the way up there, like how? Then you keep going down, you get to the bottom of sort of Stavelo, and then that sort of final straight from bottom of the hill at Stavelo all the way through Blanchimont up to the chicane. It's pretty much, it's uphill. Like it's a real gentle incline, but it's like a good kilometre and a half, and all the way your legs are just going like, it's brutal, but it is a lot of fun, and it like you got the pine trees that smell so sweet, and that's really cool. I picked that as my favourite. I think there's some other, like Singapore is actually a lot of fun as well, even though it's like really humid and it's at night. It's just really, really cool. Suzuka is class as well. I think probably my least favourite would be Austria, which is odd because it is one of the shortest tracks on the calendar, but it is so uphill. Like you literally, you get up, obviously the hill at turn 1, and then from turn 2 to turn 3, it just keeps going up and up and up and up. And your legs are just like, oh my God, like this is crazy. And I remember like I ran it, like I'd not sort of fueled myself well through the day or anything. And I literally crossed the finish line, and sorry to anyone eating their dinner right now, whatever, but I literally got to the finish line and I threw up as I got over the finish line on Max Verstappen's grid spot, and I was just like, but then I texted a mate of mine.
Why he gets bad starts?
This was the race where he in Austria he made a terrible start, and I texted my mate of mine after that. I was like, oh, if he wins tomorrow, like it's my lucky charm. He made a terrible start and then fought back and won the race. I was like, you are welcome, Max. There you go.
That little bit of extra wheel spin, just a bit of sweet corn that got caught under.
Yeah, brutal.
I love that.
So brutal.
Well, that's because it is very difficult from the TV feed to get a perspective of the undulation, the change in elevation. But I think that's what makes great tracks, not just to race at, but also to run around. Apparently, so I really wanted to. I remember I went Silverstone this year. I went to Silverstone in 2019 as well, and obviously afterwards I walked the whole track.
I think, and it is something that I think we in F1 take for granted. Like, and when I've sort of put things about track runs, people are like, oh, like how can I do this? Like, how do I go about it? I'm like, oh, well, actually, like it's only if you're in the paddock, and that is again such a thing, a little thing that we take for granted that actually we can go and run this racetrack, and which is wonderful, and also actually in terms of like your own sort of like personal bests and whatever, think about it, it's actually the perfect layout. Like you've got a wide big expanse, you're not running through a park, you've got one sort of line to follow, you've not got dogs and little children on scooters and all of that sort of to avoid. Like you can just be like, I'm just going to go for it. It's perfect, and something we take for granted, but we like to maximize when we can. Definitely,
it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Well, and then what about kind of? Do you ever ponder much what life would have been like if you hadn't have gone down the F1 journalism route? Like, do you think that? I know you mentioned you were big into your football as a youngster. Like, was that that decision you made at the time to go down to follow Formula One and create your own blog and then get the job, blah, blah, blah. Do you ever think too much about kind of, if you'd have, or maybe outside of journalism entirely, if there were any other kind of potential career avenues you might have ended up going down?
Yeah, I do. And honestly, it terrifies me. Like, it terrifies me to think what life would look like had I not done that and made the decisions I did. Because it was, it was just as I started to sort of get into things with NBC and things sort of really took off with that. It was around a similar time, unfortunately, my mum got sick and she couldn't work anymore. And I was in a position where I had to basically help her and sort of support her financially and things like that. And that was a big undertaking to take sort of 19, 20 years old. But I wouldn't have been able to do that unless I'd had that job. And it scares me to think sort of what life would look like for the both of us had I not done that. So I think on that side I'm very sort of thankful it happened. And yeah, honestly, like I, I really don't know what life would look like had I not gone down the F1 route. Because like even before I set up the website or anything, like I planned to go to university. I did. I went to UCL in London. I studied history. I was able to do that alongside my work with NBC.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't know, like what would I have done with a history degree? And I've still got it in my back pocket. So if in 10 years' time I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to be a journalist anymore, I've got a degree to go and do something with.
Mm.
But it's yeah, it's strange. Like I don't know. Like I've got a lot of interest in a lot of things. Like I love sort of like I'm into politics. I love reading my history books. Like I'm yeah big into even sort of like economic stuff like that really interests me. And but just the idea of like being in like a 9 to 5 job, like or working in an office and stuff like that, I just can't see myself doing that. And I don't know if that's because of my personality or if because for
Mm.
the past 8 years I've had a job where I've not done that and I've just
Well, I
been
was going to
really sort
say,
of mollycoddled. And it's crazy.
you've never done that though, have you? You've never done the
No.
9 to 5. That's
No,
never
not
been like
really.
a format.
No, no,
No.
which is crazy. And
Mm.
like it's. I mean, my everyone sort of has like oh shit job stories, and my shit job story like when I was 14 or whatever, I was working in a pub for 3.75 an hour washing dishes, and that's kind of like a pretty standard thing. But like I never
Yeah.
like yeah, like my sort of first proper job was literally working as an F1 journalist. And I know
Mm.
how rare that is and how I don't think anyone else in the media center has that story because it's just,
Mm.
it's not normal. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's strange. So yeah, it's odd to sort of picture what I would have done had I not gone into F1, had gone into journalism at all. Yeah, I don't know, but I quite like not to dwell on it too much because I think
No.
like life's been better for doing it. I
Life.
think.
Yeah, and life's too short to
Yeah.
spend your time worrying about what could have been. Because,
Yeah.
but isn't it funny how that? I think we're both in positions where we've got these platforms and we're incredibly privileged to be in the positions we're in. And it's funny how you can look back to that first website you set up. I look back to I did YouTube as a hobby for like 4 years with football. I got nowhere, and then I decided, I look back at all these little decisions and
Yeah.
how that's got me, and I'm like, wow, like you think of these things at the time as quite innocuous, small kind of, I guess, yeah, just small decisions that amplify over the course of
Yeah.
your life.
Yeah.
And obviously
Exactly.
we can look back quite fondly, I suppose, on a lot of these things. And I don't have regrets about. I did like a college degree for 2 years doing
Mm.
motorsport engineering, which
Nice.
I never followed that. I went into design, so I could
Yeah.
I could see that as like, oh, that was a waste. But then no, because I probably wouldn't have taken the route and met the people I met, and
Exactly.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
You can't have regrets positively or
No.
negatively about
No.
these things,
Definitely not.
because
No. And I think
everything,
that
as long as you're content where you are, like, it's got you
yeah.
there for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. Like so when I applied to university, so before I even was thinking about F1 journalism,
Mm,
like I applied to go to Oxford, and for me it was like
mm,
I was a straight A student. I was like I want to go to Oxford and I want to study history and whatever.
yeah,
And I sort of started doing some writing on the side or whatever. And then I went and like applied to Oxford and everything like that and did all that. And my teachers had been like, if you do this, like you're not allowed to have a job on the side. You have to give up your journalism. I was like, that's fine. Like it's only very early days. I've set up this little blog. It's not going to go anywhere. I just want
yeah,
to, like, I want to get on this application. And I got rejected. And at the time it was like, oh, the world's over. Like everything I've been working
mm,
towards, like what the hell? But I think back now and I'm like, had that happened, had I got in, my life would be totally like I would probably not be working in F1. Like I wouldn't be doing any of this. So it's strange. And yeah, like even think back to I mean, a few years back, I was sort of at a position where I had after I left NBC basically at the end of 2017. Because they gave up the TV rights, so they were like, we don't need you anymore, which was fair. And I had like
mm,
a few offers on the table, and it's kind of like it it was very interesting kind of thing, okay, which route do I want to go down? And like I had the chance sort of for full season stuff with Crash, which was great. And there was another opportunity that I was really tempted by, and they were very persistent. Like, I think there were sort of 4 or 5 offers, and every time it was like, oh, we can give you this as well. And
mm,
it was really hard to say no, but I just knew it would have put me on just a very slightly different path, but not the one that I wanted to be on. So I turned it down. I remember like I spoke to a couple of people about it a couple of weeks and months after it happened, and they were like, "Luke, mate, what have you done? Like, what are you doing? Like, that's a
mm,
terrible decision." And then, but now I look back, I'm like, that was 100% the right decision, because it was always a case of I want to be doing this job I am now. So it's weird. Like, you do look at sort of little life things, and a 50-50 decision where you're probably not going to end up with massive regrets either way. You're going to be happy either way, but you've always got to have, I guess, that end target in sight of where you want to be. It's funny, but I'm happy how it worked out.
And it's difficult as well. Again, all of the pushbacks that you get, all the rejections that we all get through life, it's impossible to quantify the positives that come from them as well, because, you have to make mistakes. You have to be told no to grow and learn. Like, no one ever becomes content and happy, successful in their lives if everything just goes their way at all times, and they never come across any kind of struggle, or, because that I think that's what makes you kind of dig deep in yourself. But talking of digging deep, I want to get your personal, before we go into the quickfire round. So we are hour 15 in, mate. This has flown by. I want to get, first of all, how are you enjoying this year, mate? This season has been a bit of a banger, isn't it? And just personally, just from the heart, are you loving it?
Yeah, completely. Like, it has been the season I think we've been craving for the past sort of, 6, 7, 8 years, basically.
Absolutely.
2012 was probably the last year that was like this, because I know the Hamilton-Rosberg years were close, but it was always a Mercedes dominance, and it was all within one team. I think that we got close to it when Ferrari was sort of quite challenging, like 17, 18 mainly, but it never got to this level where you've just got the intensity of the battle between Mercedes and Red Bull, Lewis and Max. I think Silverstone was just incredible. Like, after everything, like, it was always going to happen at some point, but to see that moment finally go was just mind-blowing. And I think that has now set the tone for the rest of the year. Like, I think it's really sparked things off, and I that's just incredible. Like, it's the story that we want, and ultimately our jobs basically are to tell these stories and convey what's going on. And a lot of the time, like, it's quite like, oh, Lewis won again, Bottas was P2, whatever. It gets a little bit samey. So
clutching at straws a bit.
Yeah, so you want to be able to tell these sort of these great dramatic moments. And I mean, Silverstone at Cops, that's going to be a moment we look back on in decades to come and 100%. Say that was the first major flashpoint in the Hamilton-Verstappen rivalry. It's been a mega season. I think that it's weird sort of treating it going into the season, I guess, because of everything that happened last year with COVID. And I was talking to some colleagues this morning. I said, like, it's summer break, but we're not even halfway through the year. Like, it's going to be round 11 of 23. It's a long old year.
I know.
But as long as this title fight keeps going, I think it's going to keep things very spicy and very interesting for us.
Absolutely. And obviously, first glimpse in the flesh of the 22 car. I mean, are you feeling positive about the future? I'll be honest, I am feeling very positive. I think I'm feeling more positive than a lot of people I've spoken to. I feel like the right people are making these decisions. I would trust Minton with Ross Brawn. I trust Ross Brawn that much, gladly. I mean, how do you kind of? I'm seeing the decision making. I haven't agreed with every single decision that Liberty have made necessarily, but generally speaking, I think they're pushing the sport in the correct direction that it needs to go. How are you feeling about the future?
Yeah, I'm really excited as well. And I tend to be quite, I'm always a glass half full person. Like, I will always sort of be like, oh, this is mega, or let's get excited for this. And even with the sprint races, like, everyone around me was like, oh, this is crap. And I was like, well, actually, it might be quite good.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thought that it was never going to be, I think, wall-to-wall action that they were promising. But like Alonso's start and stuff, that proved the value of it. So,
Alonso didn't get the memo from the negative people,
exactly,
did he? He was just like, fuck you, I'm going.
And it's that kind of, I think there's a lot of, often a lot of cynicism, particularly I think within F1, like people in the paddock, like, oh, okay, it's going to be rubbish or whatever. But actually, I'm excited for 22, and I think that next year won't be the moment it changes, because you'll have the teams with the bigger resources. You've had the time and the money to really get ahead of the game. Your Mercedes, your Red Bull, your Ferrari, they're probably going to be at the front. But I think as the budget cap continues to bite, and I think as teams continue to build up, I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I think that McLaren are in an excellent position. I think that once they've got all their infrastructure finished, 2024, I think they're going to be right up there. I think that Lando's been doing such a sensational job this year that he's going to be leading that. I think Aston Martin as well. I mean, Lawrence Stroll, he doesn't mess around. Like he will make that a success. So again, they're going to be up there, I think, by that point as well.
I think they're dark horses. I really do.
Yeah,
I really do.
Like, I mean, well, you did your video on it, and it's like that's what people are interested in. They want that sort of multi-car fight, and I think that we've got a flavour for what it could be this year with 2 teams. But imagine if that was like 5 teams or 6 teams. So no, I'm really excited. I think that it might take a couple of years after 22 to really come into play and really get sort of exciting. Definitely. But it'll be so worth the wait, I think, by the time we get there.
Yeah. I think it's important to be measured and be like, look, it's not going to be like necessarily be incredible like straight away.
Yeah.
You need to give it time. But this is a long-term change. And hopefully, and this is what I'm saying, if Lewis can get number 8 this year, then if the FIA do their job right, if Liberty Media do their job right and make this sport as competitive as it should be and give talent over, because I've said this before, I think if F1 was a meritocracy like football is, where it's accessible, anyone can perform, I think 80% of the grid would be different because so many drivers fall by the wayside who don't have the budget to get through. Yeah. But if... And there's a lot of talk, I know, in Lewis's, the Hamilton Commission, he's talked a lot about kind of accessibility at the early stages and that. If we can make this sport more of a meritocracy where people who actually have the skill deserve to be there, the cars are closer, there's not the big discrepancies, they can race more. Hopefully we won't see another 8 times world champion because it will be that competitive. That's the kind of dream, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like, I think that, Lewis's records really, if F1 get it right, they should never be beaten. Like no one should get close to his number of wins or poles. And I think that, I mean, look at someone like Max, he's already on 15 wins. Like he could do it, but it would require him to be with a team that sets down a similar kind of dominant spell like Mercedes has. But really, we shouldn't be seeing that anymore. Like it should be that it is close and that the margins are finer. Which would be, I mean, that's ultimately what we want. Like we want to see, the top drivers succeed, and we want to see really the 20 best drivers in the world. And I know that's not always possible. And I think that, if you drew up that list right now, would all of the guys in the F1 grid be there? Probably not. But I think that, I think it's exciting to think in the future it could be, and that, you're going to have kids from sort of, sort of more diverse backgrounds are going to be getting into go-karts and then getting into racing and not being told, oh, you need to stump up like 500 grand to do a season of karting or whatever.
It's a joke, isn't it?
It's insane. And hopefully that can change in the future. Just lead to a sort of more, I guess, open and exciting grid where anyone can win. And it's not a billionaire boys club, which was a comment Lewis made a few weeks back.
They make good clothes though, because that is a clothing brand. They make some nice gear. All right, Luke. Well, this has been fun. Let's quickly wrap up with the quick fire rounds that I always stick at the end. All right. I mean, quick fire as in quick response, and then we'll maybe discuss through the answers. So, Luke, are you ready, my friend?
Go on then.
Let's crack on. Luke, what are your favourite flavour of crisp?
Cheese and onion.
Good lad, yes.
Got the right answer?
This is what I like to hear. People keep saying prawn cocktail and it's doing my head in. Come on, behave. For all the Americans out there, because half of I've got as many Americans as British people who watch.
Oh, wow.
That is potato chips. It's strange, isn't it? Yeah, it's like 20% UK and 20% US.
That's mega.
Yeah, I know, right? It's mad. Right, good answer though. Favourite sport outside of Formula One?
Football.
Favourite football team?
Manchester United. That was not the right answer. I know that.
No, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. It's not like, Varane's looking like
he's on the way, hopefully. Yeah, I think him and Sancho. I think it could be
Sancho's
exciting.
Done. Where do you think? What are your expectations for next season?
I know I'm going to be bitterly disappointed when we're 11th at Christmas and Solskjaer's got the sack, but I think we've got to be looking at the title. Like I think City are a phenomenal team, but I think, you finish second, you've got to think, okay, what's next? And I think that, Harry Maguire, I think he proved at the Euros just how good he's been. Luke Shaw is just so bloody
He's
good
so
now.
good, isn't he? He is so good.
I think that if we just sort out that midfield a bit, I think we'll be in pretty good shape. I think Sancho's a really great signing. Pogba, I don't know what's going to happen with him, like if he'll hang around or what, but I'm quietly excited about what might happen. But the last sort of like 7 or 8 years have taught me not to get too ahead of myself because it just ends in disappointment.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of United. I'm obviously very impressed by the signings because Sancho's unreal, Varane's quality. Slabhead smashed it in the Euros. So I wouldn't be surprised because where did you finish last year? Are you Champions League or Europa this year?
Yeah, second.
Oh, you were second, weren't you? Yeah. West Ham got Europa League. Yeah.
Yes, lads. Yeah. So I used to live near the West Ham Stadium in Stratford. So I would go running around the stadium and stuff. And it was one of my big regrets because I moved out during the pandemic. It's one of my big regrets. I never got to a West Ham game because, the Olympic Stadium is pretty cool.
I can literally see the stadium through that window.
Oh, mega! Oh, cool.
I live in Walthamstow and it overlooks
nice.
But it's so nice to run around there, and it's like proper open. Because my family are all from Stratford, so I know it like pre-Olympics and post-Olympics.
I can't imagine. Like I moved there 2016, and like the number of sort of like Uber drivers or whatever, and they just be like, "It's not like it used to be."
No, it's a lot better.
Yeah,
but still scummy in places, but it's fine. I'm from there, so I'm allowed to say that. All right, favorite road car, Luke.
Can I make an admission before I answer this?
Oh, God, here we go. What's he going to say?
I don't have a driver's license.
Really?
I've made a career out of talking about people's driving and I can't drive. Yeah.
Fraud.
Yeah, absolute fraud. I've blagged my way here. It's been a good 8 years, lads. I'll see you later.
But are you into cars? Because I know some people are into motorsport, but not into cars.
Yeah, sort of like I'm not the kind of person that I walk down the street and be like, oh, that's this, that's that, or whatever. But like I do. Yeah, I am into cars, and like it's not a case of that I'm never going to learn to drive. Like I did lessons. Like I did my test once, and like I did my test the week before I moved to London. And I was like, well, in London, I don't really need a car and I can't really afford a car.
No, I don't have mine here.
So it's kind of like, it's something that I will pick up, I think, in the near future because, it's an important skill to have, obviously. But it's a funny thing. And I told Autosport, I went into the office on my first day or whatever, and we were talking about plans. I was like, oh, yeah, I can't drive. And they was like, really? But yeah, that's my admission. But my favourite road car... Porsche 911.
Nice. Any particular age? Because the classics are nice.
The classics are nice. Yeah, I like the new ones, but the classic ones where it's got the proper sort of like bulgy sort of headlights and stuff. It's just classic Porsche design. Yeah. I'm a Porsche is my favorite car brand, and if they came into F1, I would love that so much.
That would be they're in the talks, weren't they? Apparently, they were in the engine talks. But it feels like they've done that before, where they've been in talks, but never actually
they have. But
materialized.
I think it's a little bit different this time. I get the feeling. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. All right, next question. Favorite band / musician?
Phoebe Bridgers, who I don't know how much of you've got a US audience. That's a really hard question for me, but she's released 2 albums. She's like sort of indie music, I guess. Absolutely love her. Can I pick others as well? Do I have to go for one?
You could go give me a list it out. Go
on. Bon Iver, I absolutely love as well. Another artist called Julian Baker, who I adore. Churches, they're sort of like electro synth pop, which I'm really into as well. So a big mix of things. Music is like probably my big passion outside of sports, I'd say.
Do you play any instruments?
I don't know. My dad, so he used to be in a band when he was younger, just like a local band in my hometown, and he's got a guitar that he like gave to me, so it's my guitar. Don't know how to play it, so cool. I'll have to get him to teach me one day.
I've got a few mates like that who've got guitars, but they're just ornaments. I've never bothered. I'm just like, you know what? Not for me. I love listening to it, just not producing it. Right, Luke, You're on death row for crimes against motorsport journalism. You've been
I've been found out.
You've been found out that you're an Autosport fraud, and you're on death row. What is your final meal?
Oh man,
what are you going out on? What are you going out on?
What do I get? Like, is it just a one course, or can I have what I want, basically?
You're having one course, mate. So there's you just got there's just one. So it could be a dessert, it could be a main, it could be a starter if you were really weird.
Yeah, that would be really weird, wouldn't it? Yeah. But for prawn cocktails, a starter, no. I would pick. I would pick it's the best meal of my life. It was this restaurant I went to in Dubrovnik in Croatia, and it was just this sushi platter basically. I had all these different types of sushi and some like tempura prawns and stuff like that. And I came away and I was just like, nice. I've peaked. Like, I'm never going to eat a better meal than that. So yeah, I would do that. I would get them to take me from death row back to Dubrovnik, back to that little restaurant, big sushi platter, and then I can die a happy man.
Or just get arrested in Dubrovnik.
That's a good idea, actually.
You could do that as well.
Probably save them.
That is a great idea. No one's ever followed that with "that's a great idea" before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'll be where I do my final heinous crimes in Dubrovnik.
Yes, exactly. Right, you do a lot of traveling with your job, Luke. But do you have a top kind of holiday destination? Somewhere you would pick above, maybe somewhere you've been to or never been to that just to go and enjoy?
So New Zealand for me. So I went there. Nice. So I basically, I've got lots of family out in New Zealand, and it's always kind of been a place for my family. My grandma went out there in 1950, and it's kind of always been where we've gravitated to. My auntie lives out there. And I got the opportunity to go there literally before the Australian Grand Prix last year. So the world was falling apart. And I was like, I'm off to New Zealand, as far away as possible from the UK. And it was, it's just amazing. Like, just the scenery you get, the weather you get, the people, everything. It just blew me away. And yeah, I'm just so eager to get back there at some point in the future. So I would absolutely say New Zealand would be my number one pick for a holiday.
Where in because I went New Zealand in 2018, end of 2018. I did a tour from all the way from Auckland down to Queenstown and then back up.
Oh, mega! Yeah. So I only did.
Where are they in Zim?
So my auntie's in Christchurch, so we flew into Christchurch, nice. And then basically we just did a road trip of the South Island. So we went to Hokitika, Franz Josef Glacier, which was really, really cool to see. Nice. Wanaka, Lake Takapo, and we went to Queenstown as well. And I think Queenstown was like the peak place in New Zealand. Like, it's just so such cool, a little quiet town. Did you go on the steamboat going out over the?
No, so we didn't have time to do Franz. We didn't do the glacier at Franz Josef, and we had like a bit limited time. But we did some other stuff more up on the, because when we went, it was bad weather and a few of the roads got because they've just got a little. It's funny how a country it's like one road. Obviously, it's not a Western country. Yeah, it's like one road. If that road's gone, then you're stuck for weeks. But it's I can vouch as well. It's a beautiful place. If any Kiwis are watching, then I love the way they say Rotorua, which is a place in the North Island that smells. My great aunt lives in Mount Maunganui, which again is just a great word to say. I just remember because Rotorua's got it's got all the steam coming out of it, and it just smells like fart. Yeah, the geezers. Literally, the whole place stinks. But nice people, very good people. Next question: cats or dogs? Cats, and I think I've got a cat under me right now. Actually, she's laying on her belly behind me. So yeah, I've always been a cat person. I'm currently at my mum's place, looking after her two cats, and I've kind of become a cat dad since getting back here, which is nice. So I love dogs, but cats are always going to be in my heart, I think. Cats are great. I had two cats growing up, and I think they get a bad rep, Yeah. They're just if you, cats can be great. Yeah. Yeah. And they're not all assholes. They can be very loving and very caring. And one of my mum's cats is so needy in that she doesn't follow me to the point that she sits right behind me as I'm recording this podcast. There you go. Exactly. Mine were the same. One of mine was an arsehole. The other one was like a dog.
Yeah.
So, and they were brothers. So what do you make of that?
Yeah.
Bald and bred in the same environment, yet completely different characters. Okay. Alcoholic beverage of choice, Luke. What do you like to get slammed on?
I'm partial to a whiskey. That's probably my go-to drink.
Nice.
I do like a good drop of whiskey. Yeah, I've got a bottle of it's quite expensive. I think Johnny Walker, like one of the top like Beyond Blue Label or whatever at home, and
Nice.
I've always sort of saved for like very special occasions. So like getting the Autosport job was one of those moments. I was like, right, you can have a bit of whiskey now. Yeah, that's my go-to. But that's kind of like I guess like more of an end of the night drink, isn't it? Like you can't really start on a whiskey.
I mean, it's 2021, mate.
You could, but yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, good gin and tonic. That's a pretty good way to start off, and yeah, go from there.
Decent. I like that. I've learned to like whiskey. I didn't used to like it, but I feel like I can enjoy a good whiskey now. You get
I once did
coming through.
When I was young and reckless. I once managed to. I was at a dinner party my friends were doing for their birthday, and across the course of the night, I worked my way through a whole bottle of whiskey, and I was just like, and I woke up the next morning like not feeling too terrible, all things considered. And my friends were like, "Oh, that's like amazing! Like I can't believe you've done that." So then at the next house party, whatever, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to try it again." And it just didn't end well. Didn't end well. But
you peaked too soon, mate.
Yeah.
That's it, done. Never again. And then final question, Luke, and we obviously have to finish on a livery related question because I like liveries. What is your favourite of the 2021 grid in terms of its livery? Because we've had a bit of time now to get used to them.
Yeah, we 10 have races in. We've sort of seen them on TV and stuff as well. So
exactly.
I would actually pick the Alpine. I think because I think it's just it's a bit special. Different. It's something that pops on TV quite nicely, and like I really liked like the Aston Martin when it was released, and like you first saw the first sort of renders and stuff. I was like, oh, that looks mega, and then you sort of see it on TV, and it's not quite the same.
Agreed. Yeah.
So I would say the Alpine. I think the AlphaTauri is. I mean, that's just a beautiful car. Has been for the past couple of years. Yeah, the Alpine nudges it for me, though, I reckon.
And obviously, you've seen these cars in person a lot as well, so you get that additional perspective. Because I found that when to be honest, I liked the Aston Martin in person more than I did on the telly.
Okay.
But I know what they mean about it. The colour being a bit. It doesn't.
It's strange.
Pop,
I don't know. It's got to kind of work everywhere, and I think the Alpine does that quite nicely. So yeah, it's cool.
The Alpine's an absolute banger. Sean did a very, very good job on that. Yeah. But mate, there we go. That's an hour 37. So I've taken up way too much of your time already. But mate, it's flown by. It's been so good, honestly. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, links to everything Luke related are in the description. I'm sure you already know who he is, but now you got to get to know if you don't. Luke, mate, enjoyed it? Been good?
Loved it, Tomo. Thank you so much. And likewise to you as well. Just keep up the great work. Like, it's just amazing to see what you guys are doing sort of within the YouTube community.
Thank you, man.
You're a big part of that. So, it's been a real pleasure being on here.
Nah, flying the flag, mate. Well, I'm sure we'll cross each other's paths in a paddock one day, I'm sure, because I want to get to some more races. I've only been to 2 ever, so I need to get a few. Only Silverstone twice, so I need to get some exotic foreign ones on my list. But
well, when you do, mate, give me a shout and we'll go for a track run together. Get that 100.
Oh yes. That you will, mate. I've got to get rid of my lockdown lard for sure. But yeah, thank you everyone who's watched. Thank you everyone who's listened on whatever device you've chosen to listen to this on. And that's it. We're done, mate. Finished. I don't do a proper outro for these, so we are finito.
Mint.